Thank you all. Welcome to Resources. Welcome to our Resources Board on the 3rd of June. We have an evacuation procedure, which I'll just roughly go through. We've all been through it before, and I know that we're not planning an evacuation procedure. So if the alarm is sounded, please follow these instructions. On hearing the evacuate signal, please carry out the following. Exit the building by your nearest exit, which is just behind you there, behind Angela and Simon, and report to their designated assembly point on Woolpack Way. All visitors report to assembly point G, and do not leave the assembly point for any reason until told to do so by the incident controller or fire brigade officer. So tonight, that I should think that's either Kath or Alison. We'll follow you out the wall. So, have I got apologies for absence this evening? I've got Councillor Simpson and substitute Councillor Smith and Councillor Rachel Taylor and substitute Councillor Hayden Phillips. Welcome to Resources Board this evening. Any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest? Don? Do I need to shout a bit more today? I can do that. Okay. No interest to declare. Public participation, as is usual for Resources. We don't have any questions for us this evening from the public. Moving on to agenda item 5, the minutes of the Resources Board held on the 11th of March 2024. So if a quick look through those. Are there any questions on those minutes, or am I okay to sign those? Do I have a proposer? Councillor Humphreys, second. Councillor Barnett, thank you. I will sign those minutes as a true record. Moving on to agenda item 6. Which is Haunchwood Sports Junior Football Club. So our task this evening is to look at the proposal to enter into a long-term lease with Haunchwood Sports Club, through which it would assume responsibility for the management and maintenance of Ansley Workshops sports ground to be approved, and that the terms of the draft lease as attached to Appendix B to the report be used as a basis for negotiation of the final agreement with the football club. I just say this has already gone through C&E board. So are there any questions on this one? Got Simon here with us if there's any questions. Person about the lease, Councillor Humphreys.
I was going to, if I could, Simon, have they already got plans in front of you? £250,000 a lot of money, but as we all know, it's a tiny amount of money when it comes to trying to do facilities and these sports facilities. But I wonder, I'm just thinking of what's happened at Hilltop, for example. There's about 600 grand involved with what they're doing there. So there's a vast difference. So have they got plans to do stuff to improve it? And I really would get right behind trying to improve it, because as you well know, it's all about football where I'm concerned.
Through you, Chair. The club, as part of the initial application through to the Football Foundation, it's had to produce a development plan. The plan, as far as it relates to the up to £250,000 through the Home Advantage programme, that money has to be spent on the ground itself rather than the pavilion, although we've got dispensation from the Football Foundation to spend some of it on the kitchen area to provide the club with some capacity to generate some revenue of its own. Lots of the money will go on levelling the site. For those of you that are familiar with it, it drops down quite significantly at one end, which affects the capacity of the grounds. So there'll be lots of levelling work. There'll be money spent on equipment so that they can maintain it properly, which will enable us to take ourselves away from that part of the activity. Training for the club and development activity from that point of view. So there is a development plan that supports. supports the potential use of that grant aid money, yes.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions on that one, I'll move that from the chair.
I'll second
Thank you,
that.
councillor
Sorry, there's a
Humphrey.
football involved.
All in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Agenda item number 7, the council tax discretionary reduction in liability policy. Our recommendation to consider tonight is to approve this policy in Appendix A, along with a budget of £10,000 to be funded from the new business, the new burden specific earmark reserve fund. So one of the things that in relation to this policy is it's a policy we haven't had before. It's not one that we believe will be greatly used, but it's a mission from our range of policies is what is the issue, and therefore why it's been presented this evening. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't know if it's just me, but I don't like discretionary policies. I think they're always open to potential risk or challenge. I mean, I would much sooner see a discretionary element put into our current policies, because this is on top of our existing policy, isn't it? So I just wonder why we require a discretionary policy. What's not covered in our current policy? Could we not just amend our current policy?
Do you want to go through that one, Alison?
Yeah. That's going to work. Might have to show. So with council tax policies, it's very prescriptive. So we don't get much. We can't change that much. It's not open to us to change. They are quite prescriptive. So this policy is basically to pick up anything that doesn't fall under any of the other policies. It's very unlikely that we'll have to use this, because actually most of the other policies do allow for giving relief in specific circumstances. But I agree with you. I don't particularly like discretionary, because it always is more difficult discretionary. But where we get an incident that doesn't fall under any of our other policies, that's when this will be used. But very unusual for this to be used. But we haven't got anything in place now. So if we've got a really unusual case that doesn't fit into any of our other policies, we can go nowhere because they're so prescriptive. But we don't set those. They're set under law.
I'll just come back on that. So, and kind of fully understand, but already we're saying actually we don't expect to use it, but we've already got a case that actually might drop into this policy. So, do we use it or not? And that's my concern with discretionary policies, that you almost make the policy fit the requirement rather than the other way around. Like policy.
I do understand what you're saying, but our council tax policies cover nearly everything else. So it is really unusual for this one to be used. I know we've got, as you say, there's a case waiting, but we've operated forever without a discretionary policy. So there haven't been many cases that would fall under this, but there have been the occasional case where we've got nowhere else to go in terms of our customers. An example might be sort of if you had really bad floods, particularly in an area, and the government didn't come in with any funding, you might use your discretionary policy for something like that. But it's unusual to have anything now, because the government do step in with sort of unusual things now. So it is unusual for it to be used, but the fact that we haven't got one means that there's nowhere for us to go, nowhere for our customers to go at all. And it is best practice. And we could be criticised in terms of not having a discretionary policy, but I really don't think it'll be used that much. A lot of authorities have got these, not many haven't got a discretionary policy, and they're not used widely.
Thank you. Are there any more questions on that?
I mean, generally, I think the policy's fine. I think the only thing that wasn't clear to me was something in there that says when a case would fall under this policy. Maybe with reference to the policies, when I think it might have been helpful to have a bit more clarity around that within the document.
Thank you. I think one of the other things we could probably just put is the other in that bit, other policies to reference, and the other ones that the reference, because most people will be covered by the ones that already exist. Mm-hmm. It just be works in conjunction with or alongside these policies. Just list them.
Yeah.
Then, if you hadn't wanted to look for one, you could have looked it up.
At least then you can see the whole process.
Compare and contrast.
Yeah.
All right. Councillor Stewart.
Just picking up on Councillor Watson's point, I noticed the policies are meant to be reviewed annually. I'm just wondering, therefore, with that annual review, whether we can have an attached report as to how many potential claims that we might be better informed when we come to review next year.
Seems reasonable. If there are no more questions, I'll move that from the chair. Seconder, Councillor Davey. All in favour? That's carried, thank you. Moving that on now to agenda item 8, which is the internal audit report. And at this point, I'd like to welcome Richard Bowman, who's our internal auditor from Central Midlands Audit Partnership. Obviously, we have spoken in recent meetings and over the last couple of years about our internal audit. And actually, this is the first time we've met yourself and invited you to the board with us. But I believe that you're going to make a bit more regular presence and talk about the internal audits as they happen. But this report is our annual report, which combines the information from all the previous audits that they've done. But you've been with us since about October last year, working with us as an authority, haven't you? So I'll just hand over to you to give us a bit of an overview of your report. Would you mind?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to explain, yes, I mean, what we took over, it was the original interim contacted us back in August of last year to say we need some help with internal audit. And when Alison started, we then finalised everything. We started, the first thing we did was have a look at the audit plan. But Alison and I decided it wasn't really going to be sufficient. It was too service-based and wasn't sufficient to look at everything we needed to. It covered governance, risk management and internal control across North Warwickshire Council. It was more sort of focused, everything was sort of focused on individual systems, and that doesn't give me the confidence that I can come to Resources Board and say, yes, hand on heart, everything's working fine, because I haven't seen the overall picture. So that's what we've been looking at, and we started that work in about November time. The biggest problem I have, of course, putting together this report was that I've not supervised any of the senior auditors' work. So one of the things that the biggest concern that Alison and myself had was that the council wasn't compliant, doesn't conform with the public sector internal audit standards. That's one of the first things we had to do. So the senior auditor was working on his own, there was no one reviewing his work. So he was feeling very, very isolated as well. So we then came in and I've overseen his work. We brought in some auditors as well from the Central Midlands Audit Partnership to do work in the area. Some of the officers will have met them. But so this is really, we haven't managed to finish all of the work we wanted to for this, but we've got sufficiently down the line for me to be able to say, yes, I can produce an annual audit opinion when I have done that. The biggest problem I've got was not going through our systems at Central Midlands Audit Partnership. I wasn't able to give it the rating that, a rating that we would normally use. So what I've had to do is look at how the ratings have been for your individual audits and concoct an assurance rating for the council. And it's come out as limited assurance, and there's several reasons for that. A lot of it has been chat with Alison as well, has helped a lot. But the audits have found a number of things, particularly around, just talking about policies. One of the biggest problems that we've come across is that policies, they're there, but they're so out of date. Yeah, they refer to people that have left the authority, and that's been quite a big turnover in senior staff, etc., at the authority. And so a lot of the policies are out of date, and that brings everything down, particularly so around risk management and particularly so around governance. So they were two key areas that we focused on. And one of the ones that Alison was very sort of wary about was that risk management falls totally on the Section 151 officer, which is a big burden considering everything else that they've got. I have seen this at other authorities. One of our partners had risk management at Section 151 officer level, and it didn't work. So I've seen it there, and I actually audited that for them and did a long investigation into how they met everything they need to meet under risk management. But if they're sitting in the Section 151 officer, it couldn't do that. It needs really dedicated people, but that's where the issue comes in. It's funding all of these. There are various ways around it, and that's something that no doubt will come out of the audit, and Alison will be able to see what we're recommending about that. But overall, a lot of the work on the systems audits, most of it's come out fine. There was just the one investigation that the senior auditor did that came out as no assurance. But we've detailed that in the report for you.
Yeah, that was to do with health and safety, wasn't it?
was.
Yeah.
It was. But some of the audits we're doing at the moment through CMAP, the counter fraud one, the risk management and the governance audits are not coming out too well. Key financial controls one came out well. That came out as satisfactory. And so we've got another one, the IT audit that we do. We've got a specialist IT auditor that we had him trained down at Shrivenham, so he's been trained to police forensic standards. But he does a lot of work. He's very, very good at looking at security and anything that could fall foul of the ICO. But one thing we don't do with IT audits is report at the end. We tend to send out memos as we spot things because of the severity sometimes. You know, we're talking about here the data that could be hacked into. So we don't want to leave controls and that, you know, until the audit report comes out, say 4 to 8 weeks later. So we send out memos saying this is an issue here. And again, he's been quite happy with that. He spotted some issues that he contacted the IT department about straight away. But other than that, he's quite happy with that. And we're currently doing some work around the leisure centres as well, and that's possibly coming out as limited.
I think it's probably worth saying that internal audit is very much about your management processes and controls, and it's very much a management tool as well. So from, you know, some of the assurances aren't where necessarily we'd want them to be, but it's the action planning and what happens next that's the really important bit. And that actually the action plan, who's going to do what and by when, and then feeding that back into the loop, because it's a great opportunity for somebody to look at your processes and your controls and say, because when you do things day to day, sometimes you don't always see, you know, some of those things in that cold light about where the exposures are. So it's a really good management tool to give you focus. So it should be seen in that light, I think. And I think this report has been so much more comprehensive, and that's what we were asking for as a board. So thank you for that. Councillor Watson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I agree, it's a very comprehensive report. There's a lot of good data and information in there. I guess my question would be that you alluded to the health and safety one having no assurance. If you read the report, it says when you've got no assurance, it meets significant risk and it requires immediate impact or immediate attention. And yet the 32 recommendations are not yet included in that report. So if you look at it on page, I think it's page 14, there are no priority ones, for example. Whereas I would anticipate if something's no assurance and requires immediate attention, that then we'd have looked at that first.
Well, this is one of the this is one of the things I was alluding to. This, you know, I wasn't overseeing this audit at the time, but so it's one of those ones that perhaps we may have dealt with it slightly differently. However, I have to go with what's there, and I'm confident in what the auditor's done in that as well. I think he's done a very, very good job. But one of the things I do need to understand is how we arrive at priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, because it seems like we have a different grading system. So it's looking at those grading systems and working that out. Sorry. One of the things I will say is that we are trying to move the senior auditor across now to use our methodology as well, which will help him, because if we can get him onto our systems, it will also mean that the reports will be produced from the system for him. He won't have to he won't have to write them all from scratch from his working papers. So that will save him time as well and give us more time to focus on other things. But I understand what you're saying about where are the priority ones in that.
So it's also about, it states in there that there are 2 recommendations from somewhere, obviously from his audit, that are not yet there. And I'll just kind of question, why not?
I think what he's done is he put a memo together as well as his report. But I think all the memos have gone through to the relevant director for them to see. But again, I've not been involved with that process.
Thank you. I think, so just listening to that, I'm taking from that those memos form part of the action plan that then forms the work that needs to be done to put all those recommendations into place. Is that correct?
Sorry, yes, Chair. And just to assure members, the instant action that was required has been done. And we have done a substantial amount of work around those management controls and processes. And interestingly, this was an audit that I requested specifically through the audit service. This didn't come up on the audit plan. It followed a near miss. And near misses are always a very good time to go and check that your processes are what they should be. So please be assured that we haven't been sitting on our hands. There's a lot of work being done around that. But we do intend to bring the updated report in terms of what we've done and how we've addressed that to this committee, which I think is scheduled for the autumn.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Some of the direction of audit, internal audit, is actually where you know you've got things to do and you want that piece of work to give you that framework of work as well. And sometimes you directly choose to have areas where you know you're going to have a lot to do because that is actually most useful to you as a management tool. So it's not always to be concerned about, it's actually a tool to use to take yourself forward. So are there any other questions on that? Councillor Barnett.
Yeah, I just want to thank CMAP first because it's a very in-depth report and there's obviously a lot of stuff that's been picked up. Some of it looks like it's been an issue for a while. I mean, do we have the capacity to implement all of this would be my concern, because there's an awful lot of recommendations there. I mean, I started making notes on the items in there that concerned me, and I got to over 2 pages before I gave up. There's an awful lot there. I mean, even things like, it doesn't appear to me like we've got an effective process when staff leave. There's a couple of items that refer to that. It doesn't feel to me like there's an effective process around that. On the governance, things like the code of conduct, and I think we all know that's been out of date for a long time. And I know Addiston Town Council has requested it be updated several times over the last few years, and nothing's been done. There's just an awful lot there, and obviously this isn't covering every area. This is the areas that we've asked to be covered. Do we have the capacity to implement it, and how long is it going to take us to implement all of these recommendations?
Okay. Well, I think one of the things that's key is that action plan and those timeframes within that, and that's obviously signed up to by the directors of those particular areas. I mean, there's lots of different areas within there with different areas of accountability, but actually that's part of our day-to-day management of those. And actually, without doing those, we're not ensuring we've got sound, robust control processes. So actually, the priorities are probably linked to people's objectives and targets for their own directorates. But I'll let Alison and Kath come back on that particularly. Then I'll continue.
Just to add to that, where they're high priority, so the example that Kath just talked about, then those actions will be put in because they're high priority. So the resources be prioritised to those areas. Where the actions are, so like the code of conduct, did you say? Where we know that needs updating, but it's not an absolute priority. We'll put that into a service plan or resource plan and make sure that's resourced. So we just the new head of legal monitoring officer started today, so that will be in that work plan. So where we need to direct resources, we'll do that, but it might take a bit longer than the ones that are high priority. But just to assure you, if something comes up that's high priority, we'll direct the resources and make sure that's done. So there's a mix.
And will we get at a later board meeting a plan as to what's going to be done?
So will any audits that have had no assurance are in the next year's audit plan as a follow up anyway to make sure that those actions have been put in place. But the action plan will have a time scale. So some things will need immediate effect. Some will perhaps be 6 months, whatever, depending on what those actions are. So we'll be reporting back at each meeting as to what audits have taken place and the actions.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Just linking basically everyone's points. I totally welcome your comments from the Chair around using an audit effectively as an engine for good and future improvement activity. I think that one of the things that I noticed from the report, again, is what can we do as councillors to support that improvement activity? And I know the absence of an audit committee was fairly prevalent in the writing of the report as well. I noticed having something a little bit more local, more working party to keep an eye and help, potentially provide some kind of framework for that improvement from a governance point of view, from our oversight, might be beneficial. I don't know what views are of others in relation to that.
I'm not anti, but I think the terms of reference for this board include that.
Okay, but the reason why I asked the question, which came because I spoke to the gentleman outside beforehand, even the matter of how did it come about that we engaged this external organisation to go and support us, and the report didn't come to this board, but it went to special subgroup, which reports into executive, so it doesn't automatically gain visibility of this group apart from to full council. So again, is that one would question, how would you sort of like, oh, I'm getting a shake of the head, but that's what happened to me just prior to the meeting.
No, sorry, that I wasn't shaking my head.
Right,
You're
okay.
right, yeah, you're correct.
Yeah, so again, is that just I'm all for pragmatism, and I'm not actually criticising the methodology that's got us to this point, because we need to get to this. But it's almost that kind of aspect, is that if we're auditing that procurement process, what kind of assurances have we got? Because I don't know how much this report's cost us. Did it have to go through 2 quotes? Did it have to be a full tender process to end up with this ongoing support kind of matrix? If it's meant to be coming to this board, great, but it hasn't today, is my understanding. So I'm just thinking is that actually having something that's factored whose responsibility it is. And I would just like to say at this point, I am not volunteering for any membership of said board. if I'm not deemed suitable to go on the HS2 consultative committee, I'm certainly not suitable to go on the audit committee.
I know what you mean. I think at the time, because it was interim resource to support a person, it was very much a staffing issue at the time. So yeah, but I take your point.
It was an illustration rather than a criticism.
It's irrelevant.
So just to add to that, my understanding is it did go to staff, so because there is we've got all the internal audit staff are appointed, so it's a sort of staff issue, but it's a pilot that was agreed by members with CMAP, and I will bring a report back. I'm hoping to bring a report back to the September meeting to say, how the pilot's gone and to ask basically if members want to continue with that arrangement ongoing. So we'll bring that back to Resources Board in September is the plan.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor, I had Councillor Owen Phillips first, and then Councillor Joe Parsons. You're okay, thank you.
It's seniority related, and it just come across as a bit mean-spirited. So.
Okay, well, on that note then, I'll go straight to Councillor Parsons.
Thank you very much, Chair. You sort of said today that the urgent issues are being addressed. But actually, we don't know what the urgent issues are particularly. And in your report, it would be very useful if we could be told how the urgent issues have been addressed and where they are, essentially. That may be the mission on my part in going through this, because I've got to be honest, I did fall asleep halfway through it. But which is no criticism of your but yeah, it's been a long week. I really do think that yes, it is reassuring that the urgent issues are being discussed, but we perhaps need the reassurance of knowing what those urgent issues were and how.
Thank you. Just to come back on that, I think because this has been a bit of a transitional audit with CMAP, when we had our own internal auditors before. I think this is a transition. When we have the reports and Richard comes to the meetings to go through the most up-to-date audit report of the month that's next on the list, if you like, then that will include those actions and those recommendations and those most important urgent actions. As this is our annual report of what's happened over the past 12 months, some of that hasn't been done by CMAP, so that's why we're in this transitional phase where he's adopted a criteria and almost a status grading that they don't normally use. So we will also see something slightly different when we see the next round of reports, I believe. Is that fair?
That's correct, Chair. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So but in the main, we've had a very thorough report for us to have as our annual report. So if there are no more questions on that one, I'm happy to move that. Does anyone? Councillor Davey, second. All in favour? Lovely, thank you very much. And if we move on now to agenda item 9, which is members' allowances. Are you heading off now, Richard? Thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Take care. Safe journey.
You can tell he's a pro because he's getting out when he can.
Absolutely. Members' allowances then. Recommendation tonight is that the report be noted. Are there any questions? Councillor Stewart.
Sorry, you disappointed me. I was looking through the list. Is it just automatic that if you are chair of a senior board that you're also listed as a deputy leader?
It was,
Right.
and that was one of the things that changed at one of the full councils before when we changed the structure. So now we're not all deputy leaders. As a chair of a board, the structure was that you were a deputy leader, and that just was a terminology.
Yeah, because
They corrected the terminology, so you're now just a chair of the board, and the deputy leader is the deputy leader. So that went through full council. Last year, September time. Does anyone remember?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it did change, but it was formally that.
Because I just thought, how many deputy leaders does one group need? Especially as the bloke who I thought was deputy leader wasn't listed as deputy leader.
Yeah, it was a bit confusing, so that's why it was changed, because it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
But outside of that, are there any questions on this members' allowances? Or are we happy to note that? If we are, I'm happy to move that from the chair. Thank you. Then seconded by Councillor Barnett. All in favour? That's carried. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. And moving on to agenda item 10, which is the environmental health and private sector housing enforcement policy. So if we look back to our previous meeting, we talked about moving from this service being done by Nuneaton and actually taking that back in-house. And these are the policies that support us being able to do that. Our recommendation to this evening is that we approve for consultation the draft environmental and private sector housing enforcement policies as set out, and that the board gives instruction for a 4-week period of consultation and to bring the draft environmental health and private sector housing policy back to the board for approval or approval after modification, subject to any objections being considered. Are there any questions on this one? Councillor Clues.
Thank you, Chair. Just reading through the papers, and I'll just start at 10/3, where it says 3.5, in relation to private sector housing, it is recognised that the majority of landlords within North Warwickshire offer good quality, safe accommodation. And if you go to 3.6 and second paragraph down, a building research establishment reported from March 2020 estimated that 70% of privately rented properties have a category of 1 hazard. I'm just thinking that, if we as a council can even reduce that 70%, it's something that we need to look at. So I'm happy to move the recommendation, but I'd also like to say well done to all involved that's produced this piece of work, because there is a good piece of work here.
Yeah, it's very extensive and it's been done very quickly since we made
the decision. Thank you, Chair.
No, I agree with you, Councillor Clues. Thank you for that. Because the team have, and Angela have put an awful lot of work into this. Obviously, there's financial penalty enforcement policies as well and the guidance, and we'll be able to enact that on behalf of our residents now directly, rather than waiting for a third party outside of our borough to do it on our behalf, which, even if a very good service can be slightly less effective when they're not aware quite so much of the day-to-day issues that residents face with their landlords. Any other questions on that? I'll take that silence as people do I have a proposer? Councillor Davies, second. Councillor Phillips. Okay, all in favour? That's carried. Lovely. Go through the book now. Well done, Angela. She wins the award for giving us the most reading this week. Okay, so moving on to the next one, which again is Angela, a report from Angela's team. The Housing Ombudsman Service Statutory Complaints Handling Code, agenda item 11. Our recommendations this evening are that the revised complaints policy for council service to its tenants be agreed and adopted, and that the report about the complaints received during the 2023-24 year be considered, and that the completed self-assessment against the code requirements be considered. So the housing regulator has put an awful lot more meat into what's required from councils at the moment, and particularly in response to complaints. One of the things that perhaps is in that is about them almost justifying their fee. But that's just in my view. Have you got anything you'd like to say about this one, Angela?
Not too much, Chair. I think you probably said enough in reports that have been presented, but just to say that the statutory code, which came into force on the 1st of April, is very prescriptive, very, very prescriptive about how registered providers are expected to have certain accountability at certain levels, certainly on the governance side as well as through the staff. And one of the key things is that we must let our tenants know that we are happy to receive their comments, feedback and complaints, because unless they tell us, we don't know, and if we don't know, then we can't learn from them. So I think part of the work of this is to really publicise that we do welcome complaints. Thank you very much for telling me about that and giving me the opportunity to deal with that and help with that. So I think that's, we just need more of that, really.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? Absolutely. Feedback's a gift. Sometimes we don't want to hear it, but actually it gives us the opportunity to do something right on the back of it, rather than people moaning and groaning quietly and not letting you know. It doesn't give you the opportunity then, does it? Councillor Clues.
Thank you, Chair. I think we are here to look after our tenants, and that's the main reason for it. And this was something that, as you know, I was quite interested and passionate about as an ex-council tenant. And previous to this meeting, I've just had a meeting with Angela to look at the last lot of complaints, which was very few. And I'm more than satisfied with how they've been dealt with and the results back from those.
Lovely.
I think our team are working at the best they can. And, if you look at other authorities, we show ourselves really good.
No, I agree with that. Sorry, was that a hand there, Councillor Phillips?
No.
I thought I saw out of my peripheral vision, I thought I saw a hand go up. Oh. Anyone else wants to comment?
No,
on
I am
this?
all for complaining though, so.
Well, that's all right then, because from the sounds of things, we could do with a few more.
I think they've gone down since I bought my council property. Quite a bit.
You still give us good feedback, though. Still get good feedback.
Positive.
I wouldn't move.
No.
Are there any other questions on this one? Or are we happy to move the recommendation?
Are you moving it or am I moving it?
Councillor Humphreys, proposal. Councillor Clues, put a hand up to second. All in favour? Thank you, that's carried. So if we move on to the next one, which is the Social Housing Regulator Tenant Satisfaction Measure. So again, about tenants. So one of the things that's the first for this year, isn't it? It's actually publication of our tenant satisfaction metrics. What we need to do tonight is to note this report and know that in September it will be published on our websites. So are there any questions in relation to this one? Councillor Watson.
Not so much a question, just perhaps a comment. When you look at the table, it's easy to be quite cynical, but when you look at the table, you say, oh, well, satisfaction handling can make 47 and approach handling can make 40%. The people we're asking are people who are complaining, so they're already in a frame of mind, that they're kind of not going to get kind of it sorted. But the point I was going to make was when you look at the other satisfaction levels, actually they're all quite high and they're quite good. But I just wonder, how do we compare to other authorities? Do we know they produce the same sort of reports?
We do know confidentially how this compares with other landlords in Warwickshire. And in some cases, we fare better on some of the satisfactions, as you say. Some of them are really, there's always room for improvement, isn't there? But repairs and overall satisfaction, that's in the ballpark, isn't it? And the other ones were about the same. So the ones that are a bit lower, complaints and satisfaction with handling of complaints and disordered behaviour, again, they're about equivalent. But as it stands at the minute, not everybody's publicised them, so you can't share them. But we'll certainly know in September when every registered provider has their the feedback published. We'll know where we are in the league tables, and that's. I mean, we have to decide, don't we, where we want to be as a council. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how we compare.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I seem to make the same point on a report every single meeting of this committee, but is it possible to have the micro information in relation to by ward? I know some of the numbers will be really, really small, but again, is that if I'm dealing with an upset tenant who's coming storming out of their house to tell me that there's not been done, and I say, well, actually, 87% of people are really quite happy, and they go, not really bloody here, they're not. Yeah, is that I'd quite like to be armed with the statistics as to, or
I'm not sure how relevant it is on a ward by ward basis.
Well, I think it's again,
just like you said, the person you're dealing with, when they're upset. They don't care if they're one of 100 or one of 10,000.
I'm not necessarily arguing the illustration as such, but I'm just trying to make the issue is that if there are particular wards that are having significant, that are outliers, then that's an area that we'd want to know. And I think we'd all want to know in this chamber if our ward was an outlier. Yeah. Well, if you don't, if you would, then that's fair enough. But I'm pretty sure that I would.
Yeah, no, I do get that. I think at the moment, one of the issues we need to do is encourage people to communicate with us and actually make the complaints, because am I right in saying, Angela, correct me if I'm wrong, what we're talking about here is something like 27 complaints.
With regard to the complaints, yes, but the satisfaction, again, it is very prescriptive how we have to seek that satisfaction information. So it's anonymous. So obviously it's not anonymous when we send a letter out, obviously. But when it comes back to the researcher, it remains with them and not shared with us. So as it stands, we wouldn't have that granular detail. But when we go out next year, I can say to them, as an additional consideration, could you give us an idea of, where we're getting feedback from, which I think would be interesting in itself. Are we getting all the feedback from Atherstone and nothing from Water Orton? So where's the feedback coming from? And also, what is that feedback? What they do tell us, because they do, if people are willing to say which age bracket they're in, guess what? What they do say is that older people tend to be more satisfied with our service than younger people. So there is some granular detail there that I'm happy to share at a future date, and then we can ask about other things. But how you have to do it is really very prescriptive. But yeah, we can ask those questions for sure.
I think it'd be interesting to know where the information is coming from.
Yeah.
Because through the tenancy group, you can then go back and talk to them about actually making sure people are aware to what happens with the information and how valuable it is if they feed that back in.
Yeah.
Councillor Humphreys.
Well, I'm assuming 27 complaints isn't 27 complainants. It could be 4 or 5 people complaining all the time. I'm assuming.
We will answer that one.
You're speaking from experience.
I was just sort of judging it like at home.
It is a fair point. I mean, I think if it's the same complaint that we track through, then it is tracked through as that complaint. But you're right, we've just discussed this afternoon, we have had a complainant this year who's complained twice about 2 separate things, but it is the same complainant. So yeah, it's
not as bad as I thought. Thank you, Angela.
Councillor Clues.
Yeah, can I just also say, I know that Angela's team are working well with the Tenants Association to make it easier for people to complain and for people not to be worried about complaining. Because we have got those tenants out there that think, oh, I'm not going to complain, it's too much bother and we don't want to do this, we don't want to do that. So they are working hard now to make it easier for people to complain, if it's there, where, sometimes it gets to that stage then where it goes from a little problem to a very big problem. I picked one up on Facebook about this lady and I went to Angela and said, what's happening? Isn't this being dealt with? And Angela contacted the lady and the lady hadn't even complained to the Borough Council. She just put it all on Facebook. She was so frustrated, but hadn't put a single complaint in. And that's what can happen. So, we're trying really hard, say, with the Tenants Association to make it much easier for people if they want to put a complaint in about something.
Councillor Humphreys.
Just hope we don't get the situation where we're looking for all the complaints and Angela turns out like West Midlands Police and says, but we counted them different this year. Well, that's good. And actually, you could actually get a big increase, but because we went looking for them and they were there to be dealt with. So.
But that's one of the things that the Ombudsman is critical. And one of the things that the Ombudsman points out is that we don't get enough complaints. And that's why we're wanting to make, through the Tenants Association particularly, and opening up all sorts of routes. It doesn't have to come in an official capacity. It can come in almost in any way, as long as the information is shared. And lots come through us when we speak to residents, and they come to us directly, and then we pass them through. It's about them realising that actually it's not detrimental. It actually is helpful, and then we can deal with the situation. If something's not right, we don't want it to continue to be wrong. We want the opportunity to put it right, because that's a real test of the service of people, isn't it? It's not the fact that nothing ever goes wrong. It's what you do about it after it's happened, because people are human, things happen, and it's about how you deal with something. Sometimes it's rather than the fact that it's happened at all. Angela.
I was just going to add, I do think for local councils, compared to the big registered providers, I think the democratic element of this is critical, and I'm not sure that the Ombudsman realises that, because very often if somebody doesn't find us, we think we're responsive, but if they don't find an officer, they'll find a local councillor, won't they? We know that. And that's a really good element of people knowing that they've got a voice, because there are different layers in a council compared to the registered providers, So I do think that's a good benefit of our stock being still with the local council.
Yeah.
I hold one of my surgeries in front of the sweet counter in the local shop sometimes.
Councillor Parton.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, I don't know whether the registered as complaints, but from time to time you do have residents who come and see you to talk about a particular problem. And actually, I've always found that when I've sort of reported those problems to them, they are dealt with.
Yeah, brilliant.
And that, very effectively. Yeah. Sometimes it's from misleading information that's being given by the team, sort of thing, who haven't quite grasped the urgency of the problem or whatever. But my guess is that those aren't registered as complaints, but they're sort of, it's the good dialogue that actually is going on continuously. Yes. And as I say, I've never found that wanting.
Thank you. Okay, so on that note, if that's everyone's comments on that, put that to the vote. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Clues, second. Councillor Davey, all in favour? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 13, which is the exclusion of the press and public. So I'll just read this bit out. To consider in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, whether it is in the public interest that the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by Schedule 12A to the Act. So we'll just give a minute to stop.